Thank you for coming. My name is Matt Dancona. I'm an editor at Tortoise Media, and I'm really pleased that you could all come to this evening's event, which is what we call a ThinkIn, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a second. For those of you who don't know about Tortoise, Tortoise is a slow news startup. It was launched in 2019 by James Harding, the former editor of The Times, and Katie Vanek-Smith, former president of the Wall Street Journal. And the idea is to try and look at the news in a slow way that doesn't just rely on the daily diary and the noise and the agitation of social media. So that's our kind of, we try and dedicate ourselves to long-term projects, and we do a lot of audio in that respect. And also we do a lot of what we call ThinkIns, which are events like this, organized listening, where the purpose is really not to have a adversarial gotcha style debate, but to have a genuine exchange of views. So one of the rules of a ThinkIn is that we don't generally encourage questions. Now, it's fine to ask questions actually, but what we really want to hear is what you think. So we're more interested in comments than questions, but of course, if you have a question, that's fine. Just to set things up and in context, you'll have seen that the way that the slides were framed was in terms of an inquiry we're doing at Tortoise into the nature of democracy, the future of democracy. And I was just saying to Salman actually that this is something that we started in 2019 because we were very concerned about things we were picking up. And it wasn't just the sort of big headline stories like Boris Johnson unlawfully suspending Parliament or threatening to break the law, or the sense that rules didn't really matter anymore, but a broader sense that we were getting as journalists that there was something broken in the social contract, and the rules that used to govern our society either didn't matter anymore or needed radical rewriting. And we looked a lot at things like written constitutions and stuff like that, but we were very much in the foothills. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and being out on the road and talking to people was just out of the question. So the whole project was suspended, but I'm thrilled that it's now resumed. And we are touring the country, going around, talking to people, very much interested in what they have to say and about their lived experience and the way that they feel that the system, democracy, the political system works or doesn't work for them, what the problems are, and even better, if you have ideas, what the mends might be. So that's the sort of general picture of it. It's always fantastic when you come to a great city like Birmingham, and there are really interesting speakers, and I'm thrilled that Salman Mirza is here. Salman, as some of you may know, is involved with the Birmingham network of Migrant Voice, which is a really important body that represents and campaigns for migrant communities. And we're really delighted to have you here. Salman, thank you for coming. Just in case you didn't know, this is a hybrid event. So there will be people tuning in from home or wherever they are online. My colleague, the great and mighty James Wilson, sitting there, will be keeping an eye on the chat and keeping us updated on what people are saying. And we might, if it seems a good idea, bring people in online so that we can involve them as well. Again, someone I was just discussing about the whole way in which Zoom is now etched into the way we all live, and also a sort of hybrid Zoom real life culture has become ever more common. I think we're still all struggling to get quite there, but with ever increasing dexterity. So Salman, let me sort of just plunge in. I mean, first of all, tell us a little bit about Migrant Voice and how it fits into the broader picture, if you like.
Oh, thanks. Well, Migrant Voice, I guess that it's in the name, yeah, Migrant Voice. We often hear a bit like myself, experts talk about migration, but we actually don't hear migrants talking about migration. So what we try to do is get that unheard voice into the narrative. But not only that, we try to push the reality of migrants are not passive onlookers. They're actually, you know, part of movements which actually change their own conditions and our conditions, you know, in the world we live. So in a nutshell, that's what we do, you know.
And I'm really interested in what that means in practice, because it seems to me that we're living in an age where regressively migrants culturally are presented in a very negative way. I mean, it's, you know, one can't totally generalize, but one only has to think of the recent events around Rwanda, and there's an assumption that migrants are a problem rather than an addition to communities. And I think this is certainly in my lifetime become more dangerous rather than less, and it's very concerning. I'm just very interested in how you think the migrant community, perhaps specifically in Birmingham, but not necessarily just in Birmingham, sits in that sort of whole idea of democratic culture, and whether they really feel like a second-class caste.
I think if you look at a lot of people, I mean, if you look at any of the recent local elections, most people didn't vote. So in a sense, migrants are very much like most people who don't vote on steroids. Because if you think a white working class factory worker feels completely disengaged from democratic or, you know, electoral politics, you know, a migrant is going to feel even more disenfranchised. So I think it's quite a, in a sense, depressing, if you want to call it, situation. But at the same time, I mean, if we look at what's going on in America, in a sense, I was celebrating the fall of, what's his name? That horrible guy. Why have I forgotten his name? Trump, Donald Trump.
God, how lucky for you that you forgot.
I know, he's gone.
I've been trying to do that since.
I mean, I wasn't
November,
a Biden. Yeah.
November 2020.
Yeah, I find him quite entertaining, to be honest with you. But he was a horrible, you know, person. But he went. I was thinking, this is great. Yeah, Biden isn't particularly that good, but at least he isn't Trump. You know, and most people are voting against Trump. Now we've got, you know, abortion rights gone. So we think, well, where's the, you know, we thought we won. We, you know, democratically, we thought we won. We've lost in that sense. But ordinary people are kicking back, resisting, challenging. So in a sense, what is democracy? Is it elections, or is it ordinary people? And I thought about it. And I thought, for my whole democratic official life, including commuting, it's probably less than an hour, you know, in my whole life voting. Yet me as a trade unionist, or organising with migrants, or organising at work, that's been a lot longer.
And how do you think, and there may be many different tiered answers to this, Simon, but how do you think migrants are included or excluded from full citizenship? You know, if we kind of have an ideal in our heads of what citizenship involves, how much access to all that do migrants have?
I mean, very little. They don't, a lot of them haven't got the right to vote.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a problem. You know, if you look at the EU referendum, EU migrants did not have a right to vote for their own destiny. That's unacceptable. They paid taxes, they worked, they loved, they were us. Yet they didn't have the right to vote because they're from over there and I'm from over here. And to me, if I was an alien, I would really think this is a pretty nonsensical system.
And is it? I mean, it's interesting because when I started writing about politics about 30 years ago, and in those days, things were rather defined by the limit that had been set by Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech, which is a horrible speech, but it did at least set a kind of, you can't say that and you can't go beyond it. And then everything changed, partly due to, I think, technology, and partly due to the way in which certain political forces in the media were revving up sensation about the arrival of new members of the EU, you know, and it was just a perfect storm. And suddenly the environment in which migrants existed became that much more nasty. And I'm just intrigued as to, I mean, first of all, do you agree with that chronology? And where are we now? Where are we now in 2022? Are things getting better or worse?
I mean, I think it's quite contradictory, because if you look at the reaction of ordinary people, so I don't look at the reaction of politicians, because I know what they're going to say. I look at the reaction of ordinary citizens in the UK. And if we look at how people have been, you go on Facebook, loads and loads of people have got, you know, the Ukrainian flag on their Facebook profiles. And we're talking about Daily Mail readers, not Guardian readers. So, you know, people are really flip-flopping and full of contradictions. On the one hand, they like migrants. On the other hand, they hate them. I mean, I remember when I was a young person, one of my school friends, he was in the National Front, and he said, I hate ends, and I want to say Packies, but you and Jennifer are all right. And I said to him, bro, we're the only ends and Packies you know. So, and he would have defended me. He would have got his face kicked in for me. He was a really good friend on that level, but on another generic level, he hated me, even though he didn't. So people are always full of contradictions. And I think what we have a responsibility to do is to kind of, you know, draw out those contradictions. It's almost like, you know, I always heard this argument of, if you want to have a debate with someone, always start on something you agree with.
And the communities you're dealing with, someone, are they at different, they must be, I imagine, at different individuals within them must be at different stages of, you know, those who have leave to remain, those who've just arrived. I mean, how well, if at all well, does the system work?
I don't think it works. I mean, I'm dealing with a person at the moment. He's elderly. He's got cancer. They said he's got 1 year to live. We've spent 2 years trying to fight for him to access treatment and have leave to remain. I say the word fight. You know, you would think it would be automatic, but it isn't. So in a sense, I'm quite, what's the word, blessed or whatever, to sit here and debate about the whys and the wherefores of democracy, when a lot of the people we deal with are thinking, what am I going to eat tomorrow? How am I going to live? Very, you know, that Maslow's, you know, triangle of hierarchy. You know, I'm near the top, they're right at the bottom. And so
with that case, it's interesting because are you dealing with the Home Office, or, I mean, this person is obviously, you know, obviously in great need of immediate care, and I think any decent human being would acknowledge that. What is the body? What is the institution that is obstructing us getting from A to B with that person?
It's the law. I mean, I always say there's a big difference. I mean, I practice law,
right?
And I think there's a massive difference between justice and law. Like, in a sense, if you look at America, the law now says women can't have the right to choose. Justice says, of course they should. So my view is, it's a bit cliched, but, you know, if a law is unjust, it's your duty to break it. And I think more and more people are coming to that conclusion and saying, look, this just is not right.
So this goes to court. A case like that will go to court with the Home Office in one corner.
Yeah.
And right. So the Home Office is actually, sorry to just try to spell it out, is actively spending taxpayers' money on preventing this individual from getting the necessary status to get cancer treatment.
But what they're doing is they're carrying out the law. I watched this documentary, no, it was a movie, the trial at Nuremberg, and the defense to the judges were, these judges did something every other judge in the world does. They suspend their own morality and they just follow the letter of the law. I mean, that's what judges, that's what legal professionals do.
And I mean, that's very interesting, because that brings us around to the recent Borders and Nationality Act. I mean, how much has that changed things?
Oh, it's awful. I mean, in a nutshell. I mean, before, if you were a refugee, you could ultimately think, I'm going to get indefinite leave to remain, I'm going to settle in the UK. That's gone. You can never settle, right? So you imagine you've got a job and your job contract runs out in a month's time. That egg time is going. You think, I've got to pay the rent, I've got to pay the bills, I've got to find a job. And as each day goes by, that anxiety level goes up. And that's a very first world problem, if you like, when you talk about a refugee from Syria or Afghanistan thinking, okay, I've got a month to go now, I've got to renew my visa. They might say no, indefinitely. You know, that's just horrible, you know, and that's just not right. And you've got to think, these are people escaping war, terror, persecution, and they're tagging people now. I met a guy on Wednesday. He walked around, because he's only newly arrived in the UK, but he's been accommodated. He walked around the same street for an hour because he didn't know where he was. And he was petrified, and he was looking for a police station because he hadn't got a battery charger for his tag. So he was worried that, oh no, if my tag goes off, I could be arrested, detained, it's going to be used as evidence against me, all these kind of factors. And I always say this, it's the little things. Do you know what I mean? And that's just really nasty.
Yes, I mean, I would guess, I don't know, but I guess the psychological impact and pressure of that kind of way of life would be intense and very painful.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine it. I mean, I cannot say to any of the lot of the people I work with, I know what you're going through. I know what you're feeling, because I haven't lived that life.
So it's often people who take an illiberal approach to this. So what would you do? So what's interesting is, I mean, to take an example that I thought was rather deplorable was when Boris Johnson was at the G7 over the weekend. He didn't talk to Macron about what to do about the whole cross-channel migration question. So what you're seeing is a kind of refusal to engage. So, I mean, walk us through it, Tom. What would make the system work better and more fairly, more humanely?
I mean, I personally think there should be no borders. In a sense, if you have no borders, I mean, Italy didn't have immigration controls up until the 90s, and they had a free flow of people coming in and out. If you look at you had free movement of EU citizens. When the work was drying up, a lot of the Polish, Germans, whatever, they just went back. It's self-regulating. That's the reality of it. So in answer to your question, what's the solution? It is, if you've got free movement, then people will move around. They'll follow. I mean, a bit like, look, I look at it in very simple terms. I've got a relatively nice house in Smethwick right now. If one person moves in, that's okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 20. People are going to start leaving, thinking this ain't nice anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's if people were coming into my house, it would be self-regulating. And
do you think you made an interesting point about many, if not all, migrants not voting, not being able to vote? How much they feel part of the democracy that we talk so glibly about? You know, we talk about democracy if it was one thing. And I'm interested in the extent to which they actually feel part of it at all.
I would say zero. I mean, I really have to push people to vote. I have to push people to contact their MPs or their councillors. I encourage it, of course. But a lot of people are just thinking, well, I mean, on even a basic, and this is for a lot of people now, I'm working 12, 13, 14 hours, cost of living, this, that, and the other. Yeah, I haven't got time to go to a meeting. I'm too tired. I've got to cook the dinner, go to bed, get ready for work in the morning. Yeah. So that is going to really just make people not interested in politics at all.
So actually what you've got is a system where, a significant proportion of the population doesn't actually feel vested in, represented by, or in any way helped by the system of politics which we claim is one of the greatest in the world, correct?
Yeah, but the other thing is they're frightened, because they think if they make trouble, they put their head above the parapet. If they challenge anything, that will go against them later on.
Why? Because if they
refused, they think I'll be refused. A bit like a bully at school.
Yeah,
nobody's going to speak up against the bully at school because they think he's going to punch me in the face. So people stay quiet. So in a sense, that's the situation we've got at the moment.
Do you think the system is structurally racist or xenophobic?
I mean, the Home Office, he's got a ministerial authority to legitimately discriminate against certain nationalities. It's excluded from the Equalities Act. Why? So to me, that line says, yeah, of course it's racist.
This is the 2010 Equalities Act, correct?
Yeah. Well, lots of acts are like
and lots
that.
Of acts,
they're exempt.
It's rather telling, isn't it? It was quite eloquent that there is that exclusion, because lots of other identities are included in that act. So it tells you quite a lot. And I want to drill down a bit, if I may. Where does that come from? Because you made a very interesting point earlier, which is that the people you meet, as opposed to politicians you hear on TV or whatever, say different things. So where does this cultural assumption, this legal assumption, this institutional assumption, where does it come from?
Well, I think it suits the system to have an ogre.
Yeah.
So
someone to blame.
Your wages are low because an Eastern European is working for £5 an hour.
Yeah.
That's a very simple. I mean, there's a saying, isn't there? Yeah, there's a difference between common sense and good sense, right? And back in the day, common sense was the world is flat. Good sense says no, it's round. Yeah. And a lot of people have got common sense, but they haven't got good sense.
And has it got worse in the age of social media?
Oh, definitely got worse. Yeah. I mean, for my sins, I've got to follow a lot of I try not to be an echo chamber.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is I try to be, with the Metro, the Mail, part of the Guide. You read the Guardian, everyone's going to be progressive and nice. You read the Daily Mirror, you read the Sun, you read the Mail. People are, pretty horrible.
Not so much.
But that's the paradox again.
Yeah.
People are saying, shoot them, kill them, ha, 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 that kid drowned. But I guarantee if I went up to that person and said, look, can you see that girl, that woman in a pram? She's struggling. Do you think we could maybe try to fix it or get another pram? The likelihood they'd probably do it. And that's why I think the government do not allow a lot of migrants to work, because if they're working, going back to my childhood, I'm no longer a packy. I'm your mate.
You're a colleague,
school friend, all the rest of it, yeah.
So it's very important then to keep migrants separate to some extent.
It's absolutely. Look, I sometimes I've gone to certain MPs I've disliked, and I've engineered it. They're going to shake my hand, and I've not shake their hand to make a point. And it's really difficult. And I'm quite I would say a horrible person, yeah. But it's difficult to be horrible to someone like that. So the more people meet, the more it's just going to break down all that nonsense.
Yeah. And how do you do that? Because if you've got a system that is actively and with the power of the law and institutions and so on, keeping people apart, you've got that's a lot of accumulative force to fight against, isn't it? So do groups like Migrant Voice, are you kind of committed to try and bringing people together, or is it the job of other groups?
I think it's the job of everybody.
Yeah.
So what I do try to say to migrants, look, I mean, there was a protest about the cost of living. So I was trying to get our members to say, look, speak out on the platform. So one Afghani guy said, look, I'm from Afghanistan. I know what poverty is like. And I'm telling you, poverty exists in Britain. So that's a very powerful statement. And it's cross-fertilizing all these, different movements. And a bit like, I mean, this whole discussion is about democracy. Often people think democracy is an optional extra or a hobby.
Yeah.
And I say to people, it's not a hobby. This is central to the reason why your visa is so expensive, or you have to continually renew it and you won't get indefinite leave to remain in 1 year.
I suppose it's difficult, isn't it? If your whole presence in this country, your access to basic rights is contingent, is provisional, is constantly at risk, it's hard then to participate on top of that. It's a big ask, isn't it?
Yeah, and what I try to do is I try to say, well, look, this isn't just affecting I don't like to ghettoize all these different movements to say, low income, trade unionist, migrant. I try to say, look, in many ways, it's the same story.
And what do you think about the whole sort of populist style of government that we have now? Because whatever one thought of the different kinds of government there were in the past, there was the right of centre and the left of centre, and you sort of knew that they stood for different kinds of ways of doing things. But now you have a style of government which is really, it seems to me anyway, is based on spectacle and making a show of things. So the Rwanda policy, from at least in my eyes, was less about a solution than doing something that would please the electoral base of the government. And that must be very worrying, I would imagine, to your the groups you're involved with, because this is not a serious way to approach very serious issues, is it?
I mean, I think it was a strategy by the government.
Yeah.
What they want to do is they want to attack legal aid. They want to attack lawyers and the judges and say, look, you voted for us, right? And we tried to do this, but all these unelected judges or solicitors have now scuppered us. So the solution is to limit their powers. So that, I mean, I think they know that Rwanda is not going to happen, but it's very much like look, we're trying to do this, but we're being blocked by all these do-gooders. It's
very interesting, isn't it? Because I do think someone sitting in your shoes 30 years ago would have had more levers to pull. There would have been at least, you would have known at least that if I go to X, at least there's a chance of something happening. But what you're describing to me is a system where actually there's a kind of showbiz exercise going on at the centre, and a system that is almost completely geared to making your life more difficult.
I mean, there's always different. I mean, the actual inception of immigration rules was against Jews in 1919 when they were escaping. Like, so I would have thought they had it pretty bad, and then they were, getting that. I mean, if even you look at World War II, they knew about the concentration camps, but I would have said, look, we need to get in there and get a lot of the Jews escaping Nazi Germany out. We need to get our troops focused around there to pull them out rather than just ignoring it. So there's always going to be a problem. There's always been a problem towards migrants. I don't think they are a problem, but in a sense, going back to my first point about migrants being taken out of the narrative or the story, they say that there's over 1 million, and there's probably more overstayers in the UK.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a bit like we think, politics is holding a placard or, standing as a councillor. But politics can also be, I'm not going. I want my kids to have a good life. So I am not going to be deported, and I'm going to move heaven and earth, be it legal, illegal, to make sure that my child goes to a British school, gets a British education, gets leave to remain, does not live the horrible life I've lived, and I will do whatever it takes to ensure that. Now, to me, that is a working class hero. But in a sense, to the narrative, these people are, super evil.
Yeah, no, it's direct action, which is then presented as you say,
but I mean,
a wicked form of wickedness. Which
existence is resistance. I would say that.
No, absolutely. James, tell us what's going on online and who's chipping in, and
Go on, sorry. Magic, thank you. So we've had a bit of chatter from Zebedee Albi, a regular Tortoise member, about how Theresa May's legacy as Home Secretary means that the words that she spoke the other week on the government's Rwanda policy do ring a bit hollow now. And I think it says something it tallies something quite interesting with our poll, in that 52% of people, when asked about whether people should come here, Britain should be more welcoming to people who come here as economic migrants, said that yes, they should. But when you throw in asylum seekers and refugees, the picture is less clear. And whether the government it suggests that if you're in government, you're kind of following public opinion on the issue rather than leading and from a kind of moral standpoint. I think someone really interesting to go to would be Robert Campbell.
Yeah, let's do that. Can we go to Robert Campbell, guys? Who's online? See if it works.
Hi, I just put my dinner away while I've been eating, while I've been doing filming. I think one of the things that resonated with me just now was the number of levers you mentioned, about what we could pull to try and influence things, rather than just being behest at the style of government that we see, which is much more of a public relations exercise rather than an activity exercise trying to solve problems. And I feel that even the levers that I thought we had, like going to see your local MP, in many cases doesn't elicit much of a response that can be guaranteed. And, excuse me a second, because they want to play the part, they're playing the party politics. My local Labour MP said, I can't talk to you about that, Robert. It's not local. It's not fixing my drains or talking about the council or something else. It's Labour Party policy and politics. And I'm saying, well, as a business owner, that affects me. But that didn't seem to get anywhere at all. This was in the Brexit years, just beyond 2016, when I actually interviewed my local
It's
MP.
depressing, isn't it, Robert? Because I mean, that's what your MP is for. You'd have thought your MP is there.
I would have thought that was one of my big levers. The other levers was demonstrations, and today we see that being taken away from us, with Steve Bray being promised an appearance in court by the Met Police today, and has his speakers stolen. So they're taking every lever that we thought we had to protest or make our point or get help to try and sort some of those issues out. They're just being taken away from us right now. And I can't understand now where we go without standing behind the RMT and effectively trying to push for a general strike. I really don't think there's any other lever left. That seems to be the only lever that people have now brought out of the box.
Do you think do you think a general strike would mobilise change? Because it's interesting you say that, Robert, because there is a narrative which says actually this is not like the late 70s. Public opinion on the strikes is very different. It's broadly sympathetic, and it's getting more sympathetic, which I think is surprising the government. Do you think that a general strike could generally be the start of something quite transformative?
I think as long as it goes with a vision and some education, and I think that's what the opposition has been lacking about. Why are we doing this? The reason that Mick's got clarity and has cut through on the newscasts recently is because of his clarity of message. It's a single issue, which is obviously easier than a more complex, nuanced thing. But his single issue is my members have suffered a year-on-year effective pay decrease, while the profits of these businesses that we work for has increased, and the chief execs have got a greater than 50% increase over that same period of time. His message is utterly clear and it's cut through. And I think clarity of message and vision. I want a better place for my workers. I want more money to cope with world events and inflation and the consequences of those. Cut through. So if it goes together with that, then I think as long as we start adding en masse the core service providers like the rest of the public sector, as well as other key private sector trade unions, they will cut through. I've seen some polls recently where the RMT are getting in excess of 80% positivity in the polls, and I think that's real. I've talked to people who are change over the last 2 or 3 years with lockdown and people working from home and homeschooling kids and all that other kind of stuff has changed our perspective, and we're more able to cope with things. But I think the government pressure would be significant.
Thanks so much, Robert. It's interesting, someone that you mentioned, you two mentioned direct action, and you know we're here in Birmingham, and there's Andy Street, the West Midlands mayor. There's a city council which I think has more councillors on it than any certainly non-county council in the country, and represents a lot of people, in excess of 1 million, I think, maybe more, and a bunch of MPs. But none. You obviously feel that none of those tiers of representatives offer you much hope in this regard, at least.
I mean, I always say life's about expectations, yeah?
Yeah.
So if my expectations are I want a sandwich tonight and I get a chicken curry, I'm going to be over the moon, yeah? So my expectations for, MPs is pretty low. But I mean, I would pose this question. One of my favorite periods of history was like the civil rights movement in the 60s. Yeah. Now, if I threw out, give me a name, most people say Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, people like that. If I said who was the president of the United States, only the most bookworm of bookworms would be able to give me an answer.
Politics wonks would know, yeah, but
who suffragettes? I don't know who. I can tell you suffragists. I cannot tell you who was the prime minister at the time in the UK. Yeah. And that lesson to me is, well, where is the change? I mean, they had a petition in Bristol to pull down the statue for something like 8 or 9 years. A couple of teenagers came along, pulled it down straight away, and it's in the museum where it should be. So my view is, I mean, if you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, if you look at every single social movement, I mean, even with the strike, right? It is ordinary people, I think, doing extraordinary things. And I think a general strike, because, I mean, I don't know if anybody's seen Pride. It was on iPlayer recently. That is to me, almost like a textbook, how to organise, but also how people change.
This was set in the miners' strike, correct?
Yeah, when they were super homophobic.
Yeah.
And the strike, and they did the LGBT for the miners, and they went on Gay Pride.
A true story, a completely true story.
Absolutely inspiring stuff. And it shows how when people start to resist, their whole ideas start to be questioned and changed. They said even after the miners' strike, there was a lot of divorces because women got a lot of power. because they were being elected on different bodies and organised and this and the other. And those, for better or worse, relationships kind of ended up ending. So I think people do change when they not just read, but also when they organise.
It's interesting you mentioned BLM, because that summer of 2020, after the horrific murder of George Floyd and this global wave of action, do you think that lightning in the bottle was it just a moment, or does it have a kind of endurance, a durability that we will see in subsequent activism around the world and here, and that was it just one of those sort of ephemeral things, or is it something that we're going to see more of?
I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement has gone on for many years.
Yeah,
I think you're right. It comes in peaks and troughs, but I think what happens is a large number of people are affected by it and they never change. A bit like, I know I don't want to use it like, but I know I was in like a socialist organisation. I've left it, but it's always stayed with me.
yeah.
So I think, people who have been involved in different political movements or social movements, they might become cynical, they might not do other things, or they might not move the things forward, but they always have that something inside them which will never change. And it's there latent. So in a sense, they might be having a Christmas meal and somebody might say something untoward and then they'll just kick off. So it's there with them forever.
It doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away.
Yeah. And it's there to be accessed.
Yeah. And I always say, I want to know what people can do. I don't want to know what they can't do.
Yes.
So even if it's having a go at somebody over the kettle at work about racism or discrimination, that's resistance.
No, very much so. Thoughts from the room? Anyone want to chip in? There is no right and wrong answers. Yes, hi, and do introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Vin. I work with Tortoise, and I just wanted to pick up on something you said earlier about kind of direct action, which I thought was really interesting. I wanted to expand on, sort of about the discussion of what kind of protests were acceptable or not. And, you get a lot of people who might have at the time been sort of said like, oh, pulling down the statue, sure, like, even if you disagree with or support the movement, that kind of direct action not going through the proper channels was wrong. But I think I sort of disagreed with that at the time. And I think this evening I kind of realized that's because if you form your protests kind of and make constrain those by what's seen as acceptable action at the time, those kind of guidelines for what's acceptable are laid down by the people already in power. So it's almost like you have to break out of those acceptable guidelines in order for power to actually realize that things need to change.
I was thinking about that, Simon. It's an interesting point, isn't it? It's like in a way, what's next from an issue like Colston, and I remember how strong feelings were on both sides. Although I think probably the majority of opinion was in favour of removing the statue. But I also remember David Lammy at the time saying, right, so this has happened and this is good and it's long time coming. But what I don't want everyone to do is just go home and think job done. So how do you, it's slightly to your previous answer, but I'd love you to elaborate on it if you can. It's like, how do you, okay, you've had a moment of direct action. It's been on the TV, all over social media. There's probably quite a lot of feel good about it, a sense of venting frustrations and allyship and so on. But then how do you stick with it so that it makes a difference? As Lammy always says, what difference does it make to the person in the 14th floor of a council block in my constituency? And I think it's a good question.
I think you're absolutely right. It's a bit of a cliche. They say, if voting changed anything, they'd make it illegal, So to me, it's like a lesson learned, isn't it? Right. So if David Lammy or anybody else saying, how is that going to affect somebody on the 14th floor or whatever, I would say, right, you got a problem with, I don't know, the cleaning isn't done properly, in the whole flats, or, you always find the lifts are broken down and this, that, and the other. Yeah. You've petitioned, you've gone through the system, you've done everything right. You've contacted your council, you've contacted all the rest of it, and nothing happens, right? Yeah. The same journey was held by the people in Bristol. And then what they did is they did something to create a furore, to create a conversation, right? You should maybe have an occupation of the council house, because that the lesson learned there is, direct action can actually have an effect. And I was chatting to a barrister about a week ago about it, and he was saying, no, it's not very effective. All these, people standing in front of the Home Office vans, or when they glue their hands on the motorway because they become very unpopular. So I said to him, do you remember there was a protest about 3 weeks ago outside the council house against global warming? Did you read that? And he went, no, I didn't know. I said, yeah, neither did I. And that's the reality. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I've been on thousands of demonstrations where there's been even a couple of hundred relatively respectable. We've had the news come up to us saying, is there going to be any trouble? And I said, well, not this crowd. And they literally goes, come on, John, and off they go.
They're off, yeah.
I go, yeah. And I will say this, if I did a story of Somalis baking cakes for an old people's home, nobody would touch it.
Right.
But if I did a story of Somalis stealing cakes for an old people's home, that would be in the news. Front page,
yeah,
on a loop for a long time.
Just makes me think of the poll tax riots and how that changed.
Yeah.
That was a really pivotal moment when you look back. It was an unfair tax, and in the end, that's all that people have got left to resist it. And it did. I think that did then create a change. And it makes me wonder if we were approaching it, something like that again, as things get more and more frustrating for people.
Do you think we're heading for a moment like that?
I hope so. I mean, the poll tax changed me. I was a bit of a lefty in the Labour Party, all the rest of it. I remember I was working in a holiday home for people with disabilities. So I said, right, the poll tax is going to be like my car tax. I'm going to turn up on the demo. If there's hardly anybody there, I'm going to have to pay it, yeah. I got off the tube. There was a sea of people. In that second, I said, I'm not paying. And I never did. So that gave me not just a lesson for that day. And the interesting about the poll tax, which is a bit of a hidden history, is they targeted South Africa House as well, because they identified Margaret Thatcher with the oppression of South Africans. And apparently I read that Kasatu said that during the time as well, people in South Africa were shouting, poll tax, poll tax, poll
Really?
tax, yeah. So there is that real glow, and you imagine the world's now smaller. So if that happens again now, I mean, a bit like the RMT strike, there's a 500% interest now, increase in trade unions. I mean, I'm in Unison. I've been a union activist for 30 years. Every time I go to a union meeting, I say, our union's terrible. We don't do anything. The union leadership is dismal. And I say to people, who's the general secretary? Nobody knows. That's not good. I say, who's Tommy Robinson? Everybody knows. That's not good either.
Why? Okay, this is really interesting now. Why is that, Salman? Why do people not know who's the head of Unison?
Because they're just insipid nothingness. A bit like, if people are just going to say, oh, calm down, let's be centrist, let's not say anything, let's not do anything, nobody's going to be interested in it. The reason, I think the reason why the RMT guy is very interesting is because he's being very populist. I mean, if you look at the way he sells himself or pitches it, when he was on the news, he kept calling the Tory MP a liar. He goes, you're a liar. You're lying, mate. You're a liar. And ordinary people can identify with that. But if he said, look, I value what you're saying, but I think that really you're misinterpreting it, most people would have switched off. Boris Johnson's very clever at doing it.
Yeah.
I remember he came out in his terrible clothing, his hair was disheveled, and he had a Cadbury's cream egg mug. And even I said,
that's good, yeah.
I got that mug.
Yeah.
And I knew that thousands and thousands of people in Britain are like, I got that mug, he's just like us. And he didn't accidentally have that mug. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a number of suits in there going, Boris, use that mug.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
They've probably got a line of mugs. And they chose one, depending on their focus group, the mugs.
Absolutely. Everything is like that.
It's fascinating because we've been talking about this a lot, and one of the things that I've noticed is that I think since sort of Charter 88 days back in the late 80s, I've been going to what really is the same meeting of white liberal men discussing institutions politely, House of Lords reform, which type of electoral reform they like, et cetera, et cetera. You know the drill, devolution, Scottish devolution or independence. It's a kind of single transferable conversation, really, and it doesn't achieve a huge amount. What's energizing about listening to you, Tom, is that you're talking about real change. And I just wonder if there are moments in society, in history, perhaps the poll tax rights was one. Certainly, in a sense, in terms of global consciousness, the aftermath of the George Floyd murder was another. When things should change, and perhaps too slowly, but they do change. And I'm just intrigued about whether we're heading into one, or whether the sort of headwinds of Roe v. Wade is that the real trend, or are they both there?
Nobody can say. I remember when the Afghanistan war, I was part of the Stop the War movement. We called the protest, all the rest of it. I don't know, 100,000 people turned up. When the same happened with the war in Iraq, we did exactly the same thing. And we had thousands of people turn up to these meetings, and that were like, we didn't have enough leaflets. But I'll take it to a real subject, about a real person, my brother Naz there. Naz claimed asylum. He was from Afghanistan. His family were murdered. The judges accepted all that, but they just said, well, look, just go live somewhere else, right? We were contacting MPs. We actually chased Diane Abbott down Euston Road saying, can we get a picture with you? And she refused. Wow. So we were contacting all the establishment, right? We couldn't get anything. We got ordinary people to sign petitions, hold placards, get him to speak at different meetings and all the rest of it, yeah? And because of that, he's got refugee status. Not only he's got refugee status, he now works with refugees, Afghani refugees, and I'll tell you a little story about it as well. And this is sometimes how I think revolutions happen, in a very small but big way. There was a woman, she was suffering domestic violence. Everybody else was watching their P's and Q's. Naz went straight in there, called her in a room, said, you don't have to take this anymore, yeah? Come with me. And he got her out. And now she's protected. And this woman, she could have been destined for a very, very horrible life. And because of those little seeds, those little stones, right, yeah, a lot of people have changed. And a lot of people have said, look, you know what? I became a better person being involved in the Naz Must Stay campaign.
It's great to have you, Naz. I'm glad it happened that way, but it must have felt that it could have gone the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I came here, I was 14 and I went to school and college, and they simply said, you can go back, even, you don't have family there, you don't have anybody there, you can go there and you can find a work there. And, they refused about 7 times, and I went to court about, I think 6-7 times. And it was no choice. It was like, my last appeal was exhausted, and I had to make a fresh claim. No appeal, but fresh claim. Fresh claim, like your case is exhausted. You got no more appeal to the court. Then I was like, I'm gonna go for it, and I started campaign. I contacted Migrant Voice. And that was back in 2018. And the lady I spoke to, she was in London, and she said, we work in Birmingham as well. Somebody's going to come to your area and he's going to speak to you. And, Sal came and we spoke. And I agreed, I'm going to campaign for myself, because what they're saying is just, if they don't want to allow me to stay here, that's fine. But, the things they're saying is just hurting me. Like, basically, they're saying you're lying, which I don't lie. There was evidence when I left my village when I was 13 years old. I went to Iran, and then that's how my journey was started. So how can I get evidence what happened to my dad? All I know, I can tell you, I've been to interviews. And it was a drama, to be honest with you. They messed up my case. They just, the translator was not that good. I said one thing, and he said another thing, kind of. And I have the folders at home as well, of my case, what I said. And when I read it back, it just like, I feel like they put it something from their own, and they tricked me in the interviews. You can't, I feel like they tricked me. Like, for example, my dad was taken by the Taliban, and so they was going to my case like first, like the first question, coming back to the middle question, coming back to the back question, going back to the first question during my interviews, and they was keep like trying to trick me, like confuse me, and that's what happened with my case. And they said you will be safe in Afghanistan. You go back and just start working there. And I said, look, there is 60% area has been holding by the Taliban, and basically half government is backed by the USA and UK, USA mostly. And there is no way, I don't see it's going to be developed back, or the fight is going to stop. Basically, fighting between the Taliban and our government and the USA. But they said, no, you go back there, there is no problem. And you know what happened? They were wrong. And, they took over about 5 months ago.
Yeah.
And now the whole, government is the Taliban, and they're holding they're ruling the country now. And I believe that's what happened with Iraq. Says, about, I'm no fan of Saddam Hussein. They said they have mass destructions, and he didn't have, and they killed him, and they found nothing. So politics is a bit, can be really bad, can destroy lives and countries, and politics can be good, can be no good, but it's down to people. So I had actually a very bad experience here. I'm only, 26, you can see my my hair, education, working hard, there was time, I wasn't allowed to work, and, but they wouldn't support me as well. So I had to work for about £4 per hour, and I had no choice. And I think I've been through a lot in this country.
Yeah.
But, I did well as well. I went to school, I went to college, I did public services. I want to be firefighter. I finished my diploma, level 3.
Congratulations.
But thank you. I'm, grateful. So.
But you see, it's very moving listening to you, and it's also inspiring. But the story you tell, Naz, is it's both terrific and terrifying, because if you don't mind me saying so, you're obviously a remarkable person, and you had the courage and the initiative to endure and to reach out to Migrant Voice, right? Yeah. And so we're sitting here today, and thank God we are, right? What concerns me is all the other hundreds of people who didn't necessarily have those personal characteristics, because people don't. It's not everyone is courageous. Not everyone has initiative. People are, a bag of characteristics, and not everyone has the good fortune to discover a group like Migrant Voice. So everything in your story involves a series of things that were good against a backdrop of things that were bad. And what I think, what I take away from what you just said, apart from how humbling it was, is also that's not enough. There has to be a system where people like yourself don't have to fight that hard, don't have to show superhuman endurance and courage and the capacity to work for £4 an hour. It is remarkable that you did that, but it shouldn't be necessary, should it?
No, it shouldn't. But the reality is, there's a saying, isn't there? People make history, but not in the circumstances of their choosing. And
yes,
Naz has done that. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have spoken out, stepped up, and done things, but they didn't choose to. But they felt they were compelled to. Naz, I told him not to do the campaign because I said, you're so vulnerable with your case that if you put your head above the parapet as a single person, they could detain you and put you on a chartered flight back to Afghanistan. And he said, I don't care. I'm going to speak out, not just for myself, I'm going to speak out for others. And and it just sounds a bit fanciful, but he actually said to me, when he watched the stuff around Windrush, he thought, these are old people getting, abused by a system. I've got to do something about this. And to me, that was one of the finest moments of this whole campaign. Here's a young Afghani kid interested in Jamaican elderly people. Now, that in a sense, that's why I like Pride, because, you know, it was the LGBT community who had a lot of abuse from the mining community, who said, we understand what's going on here and we're going to take the hit, but also we're going to campaign and we're going to fight for a better world, not just for us, but for everybody.
William, do you want to, we've only got a few minutes left, so briefly do chip in.
Yeah, well, this has been incredible. The thing, going back to one of the points that was brought up earlier about the power of, I think, actually interacting with people at a more human level than the story you told about, you know, having this friend where there's this great contradiction where you're good friends on one hand, but on the other, you're not. I'm just wondering how we can work to forge those sorts of connections. I don't know if this is a bit idealized, but I totally agree with that. I think when you get to sit down with someone and talk about something futile, like not important, whether it's a food you like or whatever, that's how you can get to know someone. And one of my favorite stats is, for anyone that follows football, when Mo Salah went to Liverpool, they conducted a study of hate crime, and it went down drastically after they signed him, right? He's an Egyptian footballer, and they looked at before and after, and stuff like that makes a hell of a difference. And I'm just wondering how we can actually go about having chats with people and getting to know someone, and not simply pushing them out as like a pariah and thinking about it in a simple tribal way, but actually talking to people.
Salman, do you want to add?
I mean, I think we've got to be involved in social society. And, you know, every single issue is our issue, even if you think it's not your issue. Look, I'm not a woman. I'm not in America, but I genuinely got upset when I saw that news, and I genuinely want to do something about it. Right. So that's, I mean, I think food's a really good thing. I mean, where I work at Brushstrokes, we have like a bring and share thing. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm a bit of a foodie, but a big factor coming here because he said refreshments. I mean, I was joking about it earlier, but you know what I mean? You say refreshments to people, you watch people crowd in,
sure.
You know, and you start eating, you start talking, you know, and I think that's what we got to do, not just in the campaign side, but just the whole human, physical, talking to somebody on a bus stop. And I mean, I generally don't talk to women because it looks a bit creepy if I chat to women, but I do try to talk to as many people as possible, especially if social events are going on, because you could say, I remember when Barack Obama was elected, literally you could go to anyone going, what do you reckon to him? You reckon he's going to change anything? Bam, you're having a conversation with a complete stranger. So I think we have to have the cheekiness to just start chatting to everybody and anyone.
You know, it's tragically, it's come to the end of the hour, and so I have to wrap things up, which is very sad because I could carry on talking a lot longer. But I have to say, in 3 years at Tortoise, this has been one of the most interesting and inspiring ThinkIns I've been present at, and I feel very privileged to have chaired it. And I think I've learned a lot about a very important aspect of the whole project we're engaged in about democracy, which is that it isn't just about institutions. It certainly isn't just about London, but it's also about common decencies and humanity and services that respond in a humane and prompt and decent fashion. And we're clearly a very long way from that. And I am really inspired by what Salman said about revolutions that happen in a very small but very big way. It's a great phrase to take away. And thank you, Naz, as well, for sharing your story with us, which I think is one for all of us to think about. And certainly I will be thinking about it for a long time to come. Do keep us in touch with any thoughts you have about what we're doing on this democracy project. My email, which does go straight to me, is matt@tortoisemedia.com. And I would love to hear any further thoughts you have. Stay in touch with us. This process will be going on for a while. We have a Democracy Summit coming up in Tortoise on July the 7th, I think. And that will try and bring some of the strands together, but we'll go on beyond that as well. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you, Salman, for being such a fantastic speaker. Really terrific. Thank you, Naz. And thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.